Greetings and welcome to Liz Art Creations. Today I'm going to show you how I carve photos and text into granite. This is a tribute tile that I created for my parents many years ago, and it was missing some dates. So I'm redoing this tile and I'm going to put on the dates and new photos. So this is what the finished product will be. This is the finished product. Now normally I do this for clients, but I obviously can't show a YouTube video with personal information on from a client. So I'm doing my parents, and this is ideal because I wanted to redo this tile anyway. Before we get started, I'd like to give you some ideas on the different types of tiles that can be created. You can create the tribute tile like I'm doing for my parents, which in essence is a hieroglyph. It has photos and pictures and it has text, so it tells a story. But you can also do things like a portrait. Now this is a portrait of my wife and I when we were much younger, so she's going to look this good 100 or 1,000 years from now. In addition to that style of tile, everyone has special events in their life. So this is our wedding. Now this is fairly elaborate. It's got text around the photo. It's got special little corners on the sides. It's got little angels here, and it's got dates and of course our name. Now this is something that can be passed on for generations. Now some people have special friends in their lives. Now, this is an example of a very special friend of mine that is no longer with us, but I will always remember. Not every tile has to be a photo. This is a gray granite tile, and it has an inspirational message on it. So it says dream and believe, and these are two different, this has multicolors on it. So it's got white, it's got black, it's got a green, it's got a light olive green on it. So the advantage of doing a sand carved tile is you can add different colors to it. Now the other advantage to doing it on tiles is they're light enough and small enough that they can be shipped. If this was a 5,000 pound piece of granite, it would not be so easy to ship. So now that you have some idea of different types of tiles and what can be done, let's get started. The first step of the process is to create your artwork. Now I'm using the exact same text that I used on the original tile, which I produced many years ago. The only thing I've added differently are the dates that were missing and new photos of my parents. Now before I can print this, or before I can apply this to a sand carving, I have to convert it to a black and white. So I've converted the pictures to halftones. And the other thing that I have to do is I have to do a mirror image. That's because of the way in which I apply the artwork to the masking material. So that would be the last step of the process, is to do the flip. This is the artwork that I will print out on my printer, and I print it on a clear transparency, and I'll show you that as soon as it's done. This is the printed version on the transparency. So this gives you an idea of what the actual tile is going to look like. Now that the artwork's finished, I have to cut the masking material to the size of the tile. So I will lay the tile out on top of the masking material. Line it up. Take an X-Acto knife. Cut it off, and it's done. Because this masking material is photosensitive, I have to put it in a black bag and then put it in a box so that no UV light can get to it. Before I can apply the mask to the material, I have to clean the tile. And that is so there is no lint or dust on it, because anything under the mask has the potential of blasting out when you're doing the sand carving. So I use a lint-free paper cloth and glass cleaner, and I get it as clean as I possibly can. The next step is to apply the mask material. Now the mask material has a sticky side and a non-sticky side. How you tell is by rubbing your finger on it. If it bites a bit or is grippy, that's the side that has the stickiness on it. So in order to remove the mask material, you take a little bit of tape and just start peeling it back like that. Now I'm not going to take it all the way back because I'm going to use a straight edge there. I'm going to flip it over. Before I flip it, I'm going to just make sure there's no dust on here. Now I'll line this edge up on that side and line it up on this side so that all the edges work out just right. And then I will use a rubber squeegee or a plastic squeegee and start to work it down. Now I want to make sure to have no air bubbles underneath the mask. So I'm working the air bubbles out. Now that I have that lined up, I can flip this back, grab the liner, and start working it. Now I like to go side to side. I find that with the squeegee on here, it stretches the mask. And when it stretches the mask, it sometimes doesn't line up on the far end perfectly. By doing this, the sides are being stretched out, which is fine, and I'm working air bubbles out. Air bubbles will destroy your mask very, very quickly. I'm putting a fair amount of pressure on the mask as I push it down just to get the air bubbles out. In the next step, I'll show you how to remove any potential air bubbles that may be underneath the mask. You can hear air bubbles squeaking along, making a little snapping sound sometimes as you do this. So you want to make sure that you work them all the way to the edge. I see that there are some air bubbles in here, so I'm going to put some extra force on here and try and push them out to the edge. They sound like little zippers zipping along. Underneath the text areas, it's not quite as critical, but where the halftones are, that's where you really want to make sure there is no air bubbles, because the halftones are such fine detail that that's where you're going to have your problems where the edge will blast out. Before I take the carrier off, I'm going to cut this edge off. Now that I've gotten rid of the bubbles, I can take the carrier off. In order to take the carrier off, I take a little bit of tape and put it on an edge and start to peel it back. Now the best way is to roll it flat. That way it won't have a tendency to lift. If I was pulling up like this, it has a tendency to lift. If you roll it like this, it won't lift. The carrier's off. Now what I do is I take a very fine wire roller And what I do with that is roll it over top of the whole surface. And what I'm doing is punching holes, tiny, tiny little holes into the masking material. And what that allows is for air to come out. As you can tell, getting rid of the air is critical. I'm putting a little bit of pressure on, not too much. I have to do the whole surface. And you can see areas that have bubbles because they are a little lighter color. And those are the areas you want to make sure you pop. I use a vacuum table, so these bubbles will be removed once the vacuum is applied. Now, if you don't have a vacuum table, then you're going to have to make sure that you push down on each one of these bubbles and make sure there's no air in them. It only takes a split second for a bubble to pop and you'll ruin your tile. There, that's now ready to go onto the exposure table. Before I put the artwork onto the exposure table, I always clean it. That's to remove dust and lint, like I had said earlier, for the tile, and I also do that for the artwork. If I was to leave a piece of dust or dirt on the table, that could affect the artwork and how the light is actually transferred and hitting the masking material. The next step is to wipe it down with a lint-free brush. And now I can take the artwork and put it on the table. This is the artwork. And this is what the UV light looks like. Now I can put the artwork onto the exposure table. I'm going to put it down here for now. Now I'll take the granite tile and line it up with the artwork. So, that. This is where the reversed artwork corrects itself. Because it's face up on the mask, it's transitioning to the correct orientation onto the tile. Just like that. And now I will move that into the center. What I will do next is put a blanket over top of the artwork. And the reason I do that is so that the rubber liner on my vacuum table doesn't get cut by the sharp edges of the tile. Now I can lock the system down, turn the timers on, close the valve on the table, start the timer. Now I haven't turned the light on yet because I wait until the vacuum has sucked the table down first. When it's sucked down, this will flip open. Now I open this valve slightly because I don't need to put a lot of strain on my vacuum pump. Lastly, I turned the light on, and now the light is on, exposing the artwork. Okay, you're still having a hard time seeing the UV light. Let me turn the lights up. Now you can see the UV light, which is exposing the masks through the artwork, which is printed on a transparency. This is what the mask looks like after it's been exposed. Now that the artwork's been applied to the mask and the mask is on the tile, I will tape the edges so that they are protected from blasting away. I want to make sure I don't put the tape over top of any area that's going to be carved. This is where the photos are, so I have to be careful here. It is much easier to see the text areas that were exposed compared to the photos that were exposed. The sound that you hear is my compressor running outside. Just pushing down on some areas that might have a bubble. So I want to squeeze any areas out that could potentially give me a grief. It's now ready to go into the sandblast cabinet. If you've never seen the inside of a sandblast cabinet, this is what they look like. I made a little stand to put my tiles on because it gets pretty tiring on your arm holding a granite tile up all the time while you're blasting. I just put the tile in the cabinet. Now you can hear my compressor running outside. It's a gas powered compressor. It's a 13 horsepower, delivers 175 psi, and I think at 100 psi it'll deliver 15 or 18 CFM, which is pretty much what you need. You need a substantial compressor to do any kind of sandblasting. Before I get started, I always put on a full face mask with respirator, and I also put on ear protectors. The reason for that is, even though I'm using a sandblast cabinet, at some point you have to open the door and take the item out, and that's when you get dust floating around. And I found many years ago that I had dust in my ears and my eyes felt grainy afterwards. So that's why I always use full face mask and respirator and ear protectors. The ear protectors are also good because my compressor is running on idle right now, but the second I start blasting it's going to get very loud. Plus my sandblast cabinet has a vacuum motor on it, so it gets noisy. You don't want to listen to that all the time. Let's get started. The sandblasting is complete. Now what I have to do is remove the mask. To do that, well, I'll remove the tape and then I'll soak it in water, and the rubber mask will come off quite easily. Here you can see some of the mask coming off. Still easier to do this with water. So I'm going to go put it in water, soak it, and then I'll remove the mask, but you can see that the text is doing fine, and I'll be right back after I remove the mask. This is what it looks like after the mask has been removed. I haven't painted it yet, so it'll even show up much better after I've painted it. Before I paint it, I tape the edges so that I don't get paint around the outside of the tile. I paint using a high-performance white enamel designed for masonry, so it does stick extremely well. I put on a fairly liberal coat. The paint soaks into all the pores that have been created by the sand carving. That should do. It's time to remove the excess paint. I'll start by taking the tape off. Okay, now that the tape's off, I'll start to scrape away the excess paint. The last step is to buff it. On the left is the finished tile created for this video. It is mounted on a wooden stand. On the right is the original tile I created many years ago. It is being displayed on a metal tripod stand. Other options to feature the tile would be to use floor tile adhesives to adhere the tile to an appropriate surface, such as a monument. To give you an idea of the quality, here's a close-up view of some of the text. As per my standard format, I'm showcasing two of Elizabeth's paintings. The first is Ultimate B.L.T, which is a mixed media on 3 canvases. Combined, the canvases are 16 by 40 inches, and with the frame, the dimensions are 17 by 41 inches. The second is Jungle Paradise, which is a mixed media 3-dimensional painting on a 24 by 30 inch canvas. If you would like to learn more about sand carving, you can check out the FAQ page on our website, lizartcreations.com. You can also find many of Elizabeth's paintings on the website. And remember, have fun, be safe, and create a remarkable treasure.